If someone told you they watched a French film, you'd probably ask which one. Because French cinema isn't just one thing, it has different genres romance, crime, animation, comedy, etc. Decades of different storytelling told by different people. Now imagine if every movie from France, Spain, Italy, Germany was simply called European cinema. That would be right but not very correct. What I'm getting at is this. That's exactly how much of the world sees Indian cinema. To many, India has one film industry, one style, one identity, huge dance numbers, songs that seem to appear out of nowhere. If you have never watched an Indian film before, that is probably what you imagine. And honestly, you are not wrong. Musicals have always been an important part of Indian cinema. Songs aren't interruptions. They are another way of telling stories, much like Broadway or Disney musicals, only shaped by a very different culture. Anyway, India isn't one film industry, it is even five. It's dozens, each speaking different languages, telling different stories, each reflecting a different culture. And hidden among them is a film industry from a small state in the southwest of India, Kerala. An industry whose films are being discovered by audiences all over the world. Not because of billion-dollar marketing campaign, not because they are trying to imitate Hollywood, but just because people watch one and end up watching 10 more. Welcome to Malayalam cinema. Before we talk Malayalam cinema or Mollywood, we need to stop making one common mistake. Saying you have watched an Indian movie doesn't actually tell anyone very much. India has many cinematic traditions. Language in Mumbai isn't the language spoken in Chennai. The food changes, festivals change, architecture changes, the history changes, and naturally the films change too. When someone says Bollywood, they are referring to Hindi language film industry based in Mumbai. Mumbai was called Bombay. That's why it's Bollywood. And yes, all the Hollywood suffixes are borrowed from Hollywood. But Bollywood is only one chapter of a bigger story. Travel south and you will find other major industries Tamil cinema, Telugu cinema, Kannada cinema. Those are different languages. And finally, on the tropical southwestern coast, language spoken by around 35 million people, Malayalam. Kerala is a state of monsoon rains, winding backwaters, fishing villages, crowded ferries, mountain roads, tea shops, and mornings that often begin with a newspaper and a cup of tea. You might also notice something else. Many men wear what looks unfamiliar to Western eyes. It's called a munda in Malayalam or dhoti in Hindi. Traditional clothing that's still completely normal in everyday life. And that's one of the first things you'll notice about Malayalam cinema. The buses you'll see are real buses, tea shops are real tea shops, families gather around banana leaf meals, people argue over small things, laugh over small things, fall in love in ordinary places. Because they understand that the most extraordinary stories happen to completely ordinary people. So, what actually makes Malayalam cinema different? It is in that Malayalam filmmakers discovered one secret formula. It isn't that every film is a masterpiece, and it certainly isn't that the bigger industries can't tell intimate stories. I think the difference is one of priorities. Many film industries begin with an idea a star, a spectacle, a franchise, a larger than life hero. And I think Malayalam cinema often begins somewhere much smaller a family, a friendship, a mistake, a conversation, an ordinary person having an ordinary day. Take one of Malayalam cinema's most celebrated classics, Kireedam. At first glance, it sounds like the setup for a typical action film. A young man is forced into violence. But that's where the similarities end. This isn't a story about becoming a hero, it's about watching someone's future slip away. The tragedy isn't measured in explosions, it's measured in the look on a father's face. Or consider Tuvana Tumbigal. On paper, it's a romance, but reducing it to that feels almost unfair. It's a film about memory, about timing, about people who meet at the wrong moments in life. It trusts silence as much as dialogue. Even today, decades later, people still talk about it with remarkable affection. There's also Namukku Parkan Mundiri Thopugal, gentle, hopeful, deeply romantic. A reminder that love stories don't need grand gestures to leave a lasting impression. These films weren't trying to imitate Hollywood, nor were they trying to imitate Bollywood. They were simply telling stories rooted in the world around them, and perhaps that's why they still feel so timeless. One of the greatest strengths of Malayalam cinema is that it rarely treats ordinary life as something boring. Instead, it asks, what if ordinary life is where the greatest stories already exist? That philosophy extends far beyond romance or drama. It gave birth to one of India's most beloved psychological thrillers, Manichitrathadu. If you have heard people recommend only one older Malayalam film, it's probably this one. Even decades after its release, audiences continue discovering it for the first time. Not because of flashy visual effects, not because of impossible twists, not because it understands that the scariest mysteries are often human. By now, you might have noticed something. These films belong to different genres: romance, drama, psychological, thriller. Yet they all feel Malayalam. Because what connects them is not the plot, it's the way they observe people. For years, many of these films stayed largely within Kerala, not because they lacked quality, but because language is a powerful barrier. Then something changed. Streaming, subtitles, word of mouth. People watched one Malayalam film, then told someone else to watch it, and slowly more people started paying attention. If one film introduced millions of people to Malayalam cinema, it was Drishyam. On the surface, it's a thriller, but what makes it unforgettable is not the mystery, it's the screenplay. Every conversation matters, every detail matters, every seemingly insignificant moment prepares you for something later. It's the kind of film that makes you want to watch it twice. Not because you missed the ending, but because you want to see how carefully everything was built. Then there's Premam. If Drishyam proved how cleverly Malayalam films could be written, Premam reminded audiences how deeply they could make you feel. It's funny, awkward, bittersweet. If you have ever looked back on your teenage years with equal parts embarrassment and affection, you'll probably recognize yourself somewhere in this film. There's also Kumbalangi Nights, a film that became one of the defining movies of modern Indian cinema. It's about family, but not in the way you would expect. It's about broken people trying, failing, and trying again to become better versions of themselves. Its villains aren't monsters, its heroes aren't perfect. Of course, this industry isn't only interested in dramas. Watch Avesham and you'll find outrageous comedy, explosive energy, and unforgettable characters. Watch Manyamal Voice. Some of you probably won't be able to say that because you don't have that in your language. Yeah. Anyway, watch Manuel Boys and you will see a survival story built not around one hero but around friendship. Different genres, different tones, different decades, yet they all share something that they trust the audience. They don't explain every emotion, they don't always tell you who to root for, they don't rush to the next action scene. As I said, after watching these films, you will notice a pattern that something about them feels connected, and it's the way of looking at people. A character doesn't have to be a hero to be interesting. A family doesn't have to be perfect to be worth exploring. A small moment doesn't have to become a big moment to matter. A conversation at a tea shop, a silent walk home, a meal with family, a person waiting for a bus in the rain. These things might sound ordinary, but Malayalam filmmakers have always understood that ordinary life is where most of us actually experience everything important. Love, loss, regret, hope, failure, growing up. That's why a film set in one village can connect with someone thousands of kilometers away. Because the details are specific, but the emotions are universal. And maybe that's the biggest reason Malayalam cinema has found audiences beyond Kerala. It doesn't try to hide where it comes from. It doesn't remove the munda. It doesn't remove the crowded streets, the family gatherings, the food, the languages, the traditions, or the contradictions. It embraces them. So, if you have never watched a Malayalam film before, where do you begin? The answer depends on what kind of story you want. Maybe you want a thriller, a story where every small detail matters. Then start with Drishyam. Maybe you want something that feels like a memory, a story about youth, love, and the passage of time. Then watch Premo. Maybe you want to understand why people describe Malayalam cinema as human. Try Kumbalangi Nights. Maybe you want to experience a classic that has influenced generations. Watch Manichitra Thada. Maybe you want romance that feels poetic and unforgettable. Watch Tuvanatumbika. And if you want something that shows how modern Malayalam cinema can move between emotion, comedy and spectacle, there is Avesham and Manuel Boys. But the truth is, there is no single doorway into Malayalam cinema. When most people hear Indian cinema, they think of one image: songs, dance, color, spectacle. And those films are a beautiful part of India's cinematic identity. But now you know there is another side. There is a small state with a huge cinematic voice. This is Malayalam cinema, and this is only the beginning. But there is another question. Spend enough time exploring Malayalam cinema, and you will notice two names appearing again and again. Two actors who have been part of some of the industry's most unforgettable moments. But did two superstars really shape Malayalam cinema? Or is that only one part of a much bigger story?